I'm just tickled to death to be here. When Lauren got in touch, I told her that I get a lot of these kinds of invitations, and there's more than I can do to keep up with the things that I've got to do. But this is special because this is kind of like coming home. This is really a fun thing to do. The danger of that is that a lot of you know me before I get here. So when Landon reads a fancy bio, you're like, yeah, right, we know. So I appreciate you having me anyway. Great thanks to Diane and to Laura for sponsoring this. And I think I'm ready to jump into the sketching if you guys are. I think the more time we have to do that,
let's do
the more
it.
time we'll have. So let's do that. I'm going to go to my share screen now. And there we are. With my fancy new little logo. If you check out my Instagram now, it's animated. It's a lot of fun. So what we're going to do is use just a few very basic tools, stuff that is not expensive. It's not necessarily fancy. I'm going to do most of the line drawing with this little bitty Uniball eye. I think you're probably, yeah, you're seeing it the right way. Uniball eye micro. This was given to me as a gift by my host in Vietnam, and I'm kind of a pen snob, and I thought, oh, really? Yeah, no, I didn't say that. I was very grateful. And then I started drawing with it, and this thing does a beautiful job with very fine line work. And it glides over a smooth paper very nicely, and the ink is waterproof, so it's wonderful for those types of things. These Faber-Castell Pitt artist pens, I'm going to use a couple of those things, especially heavier line weights. And I might even get into one of these Chinese Fude nib pens. You can see the bent nib on it there. It's kind of like a calligraphy pen that allows for a wide range of line weights and whatnot. And I am going to walk you through a process that I use on, I'd say 90% of the on-site sketches that I do, and most of the design perspectives as well, kind of the concept level drawings. It's going to be a one-point perspective because that's how most of us see the world when we're looking at streets and alleys and public spaces and those types of things. And the way that I always start that is to find a spot on the page that's going to be most advantageous to me. And in this case, it's going to be about a third of the way from the bottom, and just draw, I'm using a pencil here, a horizontal line across. You can use ink if you want, and just leave it there. Some of you, if you've had some perspective training, you've heard that called a horizon line. I don't call it that because most of the time when you're in an urban situation, you can't see a horizon. So I called it an eye level line, and it makes a lot more sense in a context like this. And I usually start with a few people. And the way that I do people is also kind of a shorthand. We're going to learn a way to do this, not to do portraiture and not to do figure drawing, but to populate an urban scene so that it'll have really some interest and energy to it. And I usually start that with a little oval on the horizon line. Horizon line, I did it. No, it's an eye level line. Don't fall for that. Then I come straight down from that and draw what I call a trunk. It's basically a rectangle that somebody sat on or something. It's a little skewed. And it doesn't have to be, but the faster you do these and the more kind of irregular they are, the more they tend to look like people instead of geometric constructions. And that's what you want. With that in place, I'll drop down a flipper. It's a leg, but think of it as a flipper or anything you want. Drop down another one, kind of die it into this one, and I'm going to put a little foot on the end of that. And all of a sudden, we've got an armless person with one leg in front of the other. We've instantly created a very subtle sense of depth there. I'm going to put a couple of triangles on the shoulders, drop some arms down. I don't always put opposable thumbs on these guys, but I have on this one so that he can use tools and things like that. And, you know, until I start putting in shadows, or one leg in front of the other, and maybe for this jacket on the jeans, we're pretty much done with that guy. We don't need much more detail than that in order to have a believable figure here. Now, if I come in and do one right next to it, that's half that size, they're actually the same size human being. This one's just further away. So all of a sudden, we've really got a sense of depth there. I can put some even further, and we can really create a kind of a lively plaza scene almost with just a few people in there. I'm going to add some bigger ones. I've got a woman here with a ponytail, I have a shoulder bag, one leg down, one leg in front of the other. Arms. She's got a friend. Now to this point, everything that we're doing is pretty generic. It could be anywhere, but we're about to get into the perspective, and based on the type of architecture, the scale, all those types of things, you'll see we're going to a town that I love dearly. I know Laura loves dearly. Lucca, Italy. And some of you may have been there, and if you do, you'll see what we're putting together. I'm actually putting together some architecture and some kind of streetscape features that will allow us to kind of create an imaginary, ideal Lucca streetscape. So I'm going to go to my eye level line, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to put a vertical there. Here's my eye level. If this person is this tall, my first floor, a shop level, is going to be about that tall. And I want this to be 3 floors. So I'm going to go first floor, second floor, third floor. And then I'm going to jump over to the other side and do the same thing. Like so. Now again, if you've had any perspective training at all, you know the term vanishing point, and I do use that term a lot, and I'm going to use this guy's dark head right here as my vanishing point. This is a bottom corner of the building, and let's just go right to it, like so. Come across to the other bottom corner of the building, and there we've got a building base, we've got a building sidewall. Let's go to the top. Go to the top, and we've got a narrow pedestrian street, 2 buildings facing each other, 3 floors, and we're going to be working in doorways and windows and all those good things. But that's kind of where we are right now. Because this is a medieval Italian town, you got big overhangs on these roofs. Now, you see what I did just there? I made a line and it kind of sucked, so I did another one. And I did one here and I didn't like it, so I did 2 or 3 more. That's called restatement. And that's a thing. That's something, if you put a line in the wrong spot, rather than throw away your paper, erase or something like that, just draw it again. And the funny thing is that by the time you're finished your drawing with a bunch of these restatements, it actually gives it a lot more kind of freshness and spontaneity. It's a nice thing to have. Now, in Lucca, we've got a lot of these pedestrian bridges with a big archway. Pedestrians go under, they go across the top. And I'm going to put one of those straight across like that. That's going to be a nice little pedestrian bridge. And I mentioned an archway so that people can pass underneath it. And there that is, a keystone and kind of a radial stone pattern, like so. We will come back here in a minute. Well, let's put a little window opening in there just for some interest. That'll look good. And kind of a flat stone pattern. Now notice I'm not going to draw every stone on here, and I've got my pen turned sideways so that I'm drawing very, very lightly, and I'm just going to put enough of this stone that you can tell that it's there, but I don't necessarily want to have to draw every one. Isn't this fun? Easy? Nothing to it? As our hosts were saying, if you have questions as we go along here, just use your chat function. They're going to collect the questions and then shoot them to me when we take a breath, or maybe before we take a breath. I'll take them anytime. Well, let's see what else we need in here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my vanishing point and put in kind of a low doorway here, a shop door, if you will. I'm going to draw just a rectangle that'll eventually be a shop sign. We'll put something on it. Maybe there's another one here. And I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Just a vertical, come to my vanishing point, push the line this way, and go. Vanishing point, vanishing point. That looks pretty good. Now, I've put these lines here to separate the second floor from the third floor so that I can come in then and add some windows. Since this is a medieval Italian town, there's beautiful green shutters on both sides of these things. I don't know if we'll actually finish that one out or not, but I'm going to go ahead and get these in. These lines are all going more or less down to the vanishing point down there. Look how fast I'm drawing in those shutters, just really not spending a whole lot of time with it at all. Let's do that on the other side. Restatement. Put a shutter here. We're gonna have a lot of fun putting color on these here in a little bit too. Shutter. Shutter. And you may have noticed I'm giving these windows just a little bit of wall depth there. It's not absolutely critical, but those types of things come in handy. Same with the doorway over here. I'm going to put a little thickness. The other thing I'm going to do with that doorway is something that we saw in a lot of these doorways, is just some kind of nice stonework around it. Those lines should ideally go back to the vanishing point. But that'll be a nice little detail at some point. Okay, here comes the Shazam part. Here's my vanishing point. These are old kind of cobble type streets with not with round cobbles, but with more squarish paving stones. And I'm going to use this vanishing point to say, I'm going to make a radial line pattern that will allow me to drop those paving stones right in here. Like so. I'm not going to draw them all right now, but you get the idea. I'm going to drop another figure in, a head, a trunk, some legs, some shadows on these guys. Okay, what else? Let's see, I wanted to get another sign over here, just a rectangle, horizontals and verticals. Maybe two of them. How about a shopkeeper over here? There's my oval on the eye level line. There's my trunk, except I've drawn it so that his back's here and he's actually looking this way. And feet kind of contrapposto there, kind of putting his weight on one side. Okay, I think people-wise, we're in relatively good shape. Let's, I'm gonna put a focal point here, kind of a tower, I think. I'm gonna go with a peak roof on it. There are triangular roofs and peak roofs on these towers in Lucca. There are so many of those things as well. So I've got a nice little peak. I've got some stone coming down. I'm going to put a clock in here. I lost count of how many of these clocks there, or how many of these towers have clocks, but there's quite a few. What time is it? I know, but it's 4:30. Got it. So it's 4:30 on the tower. I have done some of these drawings on location before where I'm drawing a whole kind of cityscape and there'll be more than one building with clocks on it, and I put the time on the clock at the moment that I'm looking at it so that you can see different times if you look across the skyline and have a look at what's going on there. Okay, this looks kind of bare. So on the other side of this bridge, that should actually come down to the vanishing point here. It would look something more like this. I'm just going to pull out another building with a projecting roof like that. And vanishing point, maybe even do it one more time, like so. Nice stone edging, and then we've got these deep overhangs. There's windows on these things. But I'm not gonna, I don't think I'm gonna put all the detail in these because they're further away. And I want them to feel like they're further away. All right. There would be some other types of things going on in the background. I am just making this stuff up as I go along. There might be a building here with a doorway. There might be a tile roof that looks something like that with a little shadow under it.
Jim, can I stop you real quick and we take a question?
You can.
Awesome. So, Laura, I've unmuted you if you want to review the questions. I know that there is one specifically about how did you determine the height of the building?
I can show you that. Can I just go with it?
Yep.
This eye level line, if kind of a normal sized person is just standing feet on the ground, I'm glad you asked this. From the ground up to about eye level, we're going to call 5 feet. Some people it's taller than that, some people it's shorter than that, but that's a good rule of thumb for a drawing like this. And if you look closely, there's that eye level line right there across the whole thing. So from any person that I have drawn here, from that eye to that foot is 5 feet. Now I can carry that person straight across to the building, and that tells me that from here to that eye level line is 5 feet. So I carried it up to about 8 feet maybe above. And I've gone above that and said, okay, this is, you know, in perspective, these upper floors are going to look a little smaller. So I just kind of eyeballed. I'm not getting all hung up on measurements or getting it exactly right. I'm just kind of flying through this thing. So if that's one floor, and as you know, if you've done any town planning or anything, the first floor is always taller because there's galleries, shops, those types of things. And then shorter floors for the residential up above. And, you know, those might be about 7 feet, something like that. And then just drew the roof on top. So it's put together very, very quickly, but that's basically how I came up with those heights. Using that eye level line and using the people in the sketch as a measuring tool. Did you have another one?
Doesn't look like it. I think
Okay.
we're good.
I'm going to keep moving then. You can see I added the ubiquitous Italian TV aerials on top of these things, and that is some detail that I like to get into just because it adds a bit of authenticity to this. If you've ever walked these streets, you know that these things are just all over the place. Now I've got a pretty good level of detail here. Nice retail floor. And I'm going to start putting in some darks. And to do that, I'm going to use this Pitt artist pen or possibly a Sharpie for some of it. Sharpie works just fine for this type of thing because they're both waterproof. I'm going to draw the underside of this arch. Like so. And that thing's crossing a street with sun coming like this, and so there's going to be a shadow underneath it. It's always critical to get those ground shadows on a bridge like this, whether it's pedestrian or auto or whatever it is. And since we're putting in darks, let's just go ahead and put some on these windows. Notice I'm not being very, very careful, and I'm not being careful on purpose. I want this to look very fresh and spontaneous and casual. So it's not an accident or just, you know, it's the way that I'm doing it and not doing it very carefully is actually carefully thought through. I'm also going to put some darks on this door opening here. Oh man, these overhanging roofs, they've got timbers underneath and they've got, all of them have dark, dark shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and put those dark shadows on. They've also got funky gutter pipes that come down from the roof, water runs to them, and they just run them along the outside of the building like that. let's do that on the other side over here. You can see I'm left-handed, and so I'm having to work like the claw here. But I'm going to try to get in this darkened overhang. And that looks pretty good, actually. That one, and I don't know if I'm going to do that one or not. Most of these have Italian tile on the roof. That's another kind of signature feature. So I'm going to come in and just make some little half circles on the roof. Get a thinner pen and do the same one on this one back here. And I think we've about got that. Okay. More darks. I'm going to take my Sharpie, and this is kind of a stone edge on this thing that would have a shadow underneath it. So I'm going to draw a shadow underneath like that. These are little window openings. So I'll need a dark there. And as a matter of fact, with light coming this way, those would have a little bit of a shadow on them as well. And there'd be a shadow on the outside of that stone. Shadows under and on one side of these shutters. And let's see, I need to get this doorway here too. Here, I'm going to be a little more careful going around this figure that I've drawn and just start to darken in around this doorway. I am going to do that one. It looks kind of funny without doing it. All right, here's the thing that some of you are going to balk at and say, oh my gosh, I could never do that. You can't, I promise you. And it's not because it's hard to do, it's just kind of a gutsy move. This building's going to be in shadow, so I'm going to take this Sharpie and I'm just going to drop some lines to put that thing more in shadow. And I'm going to come back and reinforce that with the watercolor, but that's how I'm going to start it. Sun's coming from this way, so it's going to throw a shadow on this bridge. Diagonal shadows are a great cheap trick to introduce some drama into your drawings. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in. This shadow's breaking up a little bit, so I just added a couple of lines there. And of course, this building is going to be throwing a shadow on the ground like this. And I think, you know, a lot of times I'll do this in watercolor, but I'm going to go ahead and do it with the ink here since it's been kind of a bold drawing so far. And I'm going to use horizontal strokes to put in this shadow. So can you tell what's going on there? We've got shade on one side, sun on the other side, some shadows under this bridge. We can put some shadows under these people. Maybe just a little bit of a shade line on the side of that tower. And I think we're ready to jump into some color. I'm gonna put this here while I kind of mix up so you can have as much fun as I am watching all this. This is a palette that I actually had made that came with empty pans The pans are what the colors are in here. And over the years, I've developed a palette of colors, especially for Italy and especially Tuscany, that work very well there. And that's kind of what's going on here, because I'm teaching a few workshops there. This is something called cobalt teal blue, and I always mix some of that up to start on a sky. This is Naples yellow. And I love this to be an undercoat on this old medieval stone architecture. Works really, really well. I like to take some of that and mix it with some Mayan orange to get kind of a reddish, orangish glow to it. I'm going to use some of these others, cobalt blue. One that I'm going to, I didn't clean out my brush well enough. Don't do that. One that I use a lot is a combination of Prussian blue and alizarin crimson. And I mix those together to get a nice kind of purplish gray for shadows. And that works really well for that. I think I've got enough where I can jump in. So this is a sable brush. I think it's a number 12 if you're into that kind of thing. And I'm going to go in with this kind of a turquoise. It's a cobalt teal blue. That's probably a little much. And start pushing it up like this. I'm going to do it on the other side over here. On a sketch like this, I usually don't do a whole dramatic sky. I like, if I've got a vertical focal point, for it to pierce the color of that sky. Here I'm using a little of the cobalt, too much of the cobalt. And I'm going to come back with just a little bit of clear water and soften those edges just a bit. My manager says it's time for a trivia question. I want you to know that a lot of thought went into these trivia questions, and they are things that, if you're a designer and you work in cities, you should know. And if you don't, you can learn through this process. So here's the first one. Name 2 ingredients in an Aperol Spritz cocktail.
We can see the answer.
You can see the
we can see the answers.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
That's okay. We'll still take the right answer, first person who can send it to us. Okay, we got it. We got a winner.
Y'all are hilarious.
We got a winner.
Good.
That's something everyone should know, so I'm glad you showed the answer.
I think if you're going to be a designer working in cities, yeah, you got to know these types of things. It gets hot, and you need a break, and that's a really good way to do it. This is Naples yellow. This is that I mixed up over here a minute ago, and if you watch what I'm doing here, I put that on just about everything as an undercoat. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I'm not going to put it under this green. That gets kind of hard to deal with. But I am going to put it on all the building facade stone. I'm going to put it on this bridge. One of the reasons is when I come back and put more color on these things, more washes, they're all going to have this yellow underneath. And for that reason, they're all going to tie together. It's all going to be kind of part of the same family from a color standpoint. The other is it creates this glow for the thing when you're finished with it. And a lot of it's really, really subtle. And I don't talk about it that much, but I do get emails from people occasionally that say, you know, I don't understand why, but your drawings just make me happy. And this yellow undercoat is one of the reasons why. It just makes everything cheery. There was a little bit of sky poking through underneath that bridge there. So I've got my Naples yellow on, and I'm shocked, but it's already kind of dry. So I'm going to start adding some other things to it. This is a color called Mayan Orange that I use as my go-to red. I use too much of it right there. But I want to get this nice orange look that a lot of this medieval architecture has, and I'm going to not put it where I've got this exposed stone there. I want that to be a little bit more of a feature. So I'm going to work this stuff around it. What do you think, Patty? She says she's seen worse. That's good. I'm going to put a little bit of that stuff on these back here. The Mayan orange. Because of course, one of the things that's wonderful about this is that all the architecture hangs together visually in such a beautiful way. And I'm going to change brushes. I was using a soft sable brush for all that stuff, but I'm going to go to a synthetic brush now to get a little bit more control, because I want to go around this clock face. Need something a little bit more subtle for this so that it's a little bit different. That's some burnt sienna with a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to throw some red in there too. And I'm even going to throw some cobalt blue in there. It's kind of fun. All right. Thank you. Patty says I can ask another question without the answer. Name one of the brothers who are part of the symbol of Rome. And as a hint, it says the wolf sucking sculpture. You've probably seen it in a history class. You know this.
All right, we got a winner.
Fantastic. Now I've got a color of green called Viridian, and I'm mixing it with some deep sap green. And I'm going to come back in and drop some green on these shutters.
Hey, Jim, we've got a question from
Yes.
Joanne. Piccolo, how do you feel about markers?
About markers?
Yes.
Well, that's all I used for years and years and years. And what happened was when I started my own consultancy, I was the only one that drew. I was up all hours of the night doing these, you know, wonderful eye-level perspectives of future places and whatnot. And I discovered very quickly that in a situation like that, the markers were so unforgiving, I didn't want to use them. I wanted to use something that I could come back and work on top of. So I started using colored pencil almost exclusively and learned how to layer those things much like watercolor. And so when I started working out in the field, I loved working with watercolor, and I used that kind of in the same way as using colored pencil. So when I'm out in the field, I'll almost always use watercolor. When I am in the studio, I'll almost always use colored pencils rather than markers, because once you put a line down and you're done. Okay, I'm going to use a little cobalt blue along with this shade color that I made, and I'm going to drop it over all this stuff. All this shaded area. Now I'm turning my brush kind of sideways to get a little bit more of a dry brush effect to let that feather out. I'm going to put it on this shadow, and I'm going to clean up the shadow on the ground a little bit with it. Hold your breath. Put some kind of bold shadows across the ground here. All right. Shadows here on the windows. A little bit there. Now, I think the last thing that I'm going to do, we've got to take our 4 o'clock break here coming up. And the last thing that I'm going to do before we go to that is put some bright, bright colors on some of these people. Here's some red for that red tile. Red there, red there, red there. And maybe a little right there. If something's a little more intense than I want it to be, I can usually come back and just hit it with that rag and take it back to where I want it to be. But I'm going to use that same red and say, all right, let's put some on her. And let's repeat it right over here. Let's do something. I think I'm going to leave this one white just because we need some kind of white relief in there. There's some yellow. I want to pick up this turquoise color. So I'm going to drop some of that right here and here. And I may leave that guy white as well. Little Prussian blue. Put some color on these legs. And good. Lots of fashionable black pants in Luca. And some shadows as well. Did someone have a question, Laura? Or Lauren? Oh, I need to ask.
No question.
That he says. Let's do our last trivia question. What famous painter has a tomb in the Pantheon? Oh, this one's taking a little longer.
Nobody yet.
And put a few splatters in the sky by just holding the brush and tapping it.
Okay, we have a winner.
Really?
We do.
That's impressive. Throw a little bit of color on the ground there, and I think we're about done with this, guys. Oh, more color on people, okay. I think we're looking pretty good. I'm just kind of noticing little details now that there should be a shadow coming back on that building there. You think? Now, where I left a spot for these signs and things, I'm going to come back to that after our break here and just work on some details while we take some questions from you guys if you would like to do that. Right now, I'm just going to add a couple of little details and we're going to call this done for these purposes.
We do have one question.
Yes?
It was related to your colors. You had Prussian blue, Naples yellow, and what is your orange color name?
Mayan, like the Mayan Indians in South America. I love that color. This is some cobalt blue that I'm just throwing into the shadow area to enliven it a little bit. And I think it made a difference.
Great, Jim. We have another question.
Good.
Is there a particular brand of sketch pad that you recommend?
Sketch pad. Depends on what you're using it for. If you're going out to, like if you're going on a trip, you know, and you plan on sketching cities or something like that, what I have found is that it's nice to have something with a hard cover. So it'll take a beating under airline seats and whatnot. And I like, because I work typically in ink and sometimes pencil, I like to have a smooth paper. I like for it to be heavy, like 140 pound at least, because I like to do watercolor on top of it. And for my money, the best one that puts all those things together is the Moleskine watercolor outfits that come in all sorts of different sizes. And they're not cheap, but it's a lifetime book. I've got scores of them up on my bookshelves. And I wouldn't trade them for anything. Stillman and Byrne also makes excellent sketchbooks. And there's a company called Handmade that has come on the scene relatively recently and does a nice job as well. Okay, I'm going to let that breathe for a while and turn it back over to you guys.
Okay, thank you. It looks great.
Thank you, Jim. I'm gonna be announcing the 3 winners from our trivia questions. On the first question, congrats, Kim White, you're the winner. Number 2, Susan Cancel, congratulations. And then number 3, Laura McGee, congrats. We'll be contacting you guys and then let us know if you have any questions. I think we're gonna be sharing Jim's screen right now.
Laura, do you want to go ahead and announce the social media tags for our final raffle that we'll be giving away? We're going to be giving away one more book.
Yes, if you guys want to share your sketches online on social media, if you tag us at DFWASLA on Instagram and Facebook, and then the hashtag Sketching into Italia, everyone will be put into a draw for another book of Jim. And we can't wait to see you guys, what you have. Please share it with us.
Yeah, please post your sketches. And I think right now we'll actually take a picture. Oh, the hashtag is at DFW ASLA. Yes.
Yes.
If you tag us in DFW ASLA, I see some questions. Laura, I think we had a slide that we could pull up for 1 second if you'd like.
Lena, do you have that? Can you share that with us, please?
We can bring it back up at the very end. That's okay. Why don't we just go ahead and stay on James? What we will do here shortly is, I guess we can just open the floor up to any questions, any finishing touches, open the conversation, then we'll just go ahead and request that everyone turn their cameras on, and we will hold up our drawings, our sketches, and take an overall photograph.
You guys, if you have questions, they don't necessarily have to be about this sketch. You got questions about sketching in general, or Aperol spritzes, or kind of anything that occurs to you relative to working like this. In the past 25 years, I guess, I've been able to travel to about 45 countries doing this kind of thing. And boy, I just wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm pretty much doing it full time, teaching workshops now. And one of the questions that I get more often than anything else is, I want to do that.
We have another question. For people who are new at watercolor, do you have any suggestions for working with it? I'm just gonna chime in and say, I made a rookie mistake that I've done before, and I can't believe I did it again, where I started sketching just now with a non-waterproof pen. So that's probably the first mistake not to make, but I'll let you answer that, Jim. Suggestions for working with watercolor.
Well, let me back up just a tad first and say that I have a really good friend, a brilliant architect in Buenos Aires, who teaches a workshop just on using water-soluble ink with watercolor and produces really beautiful effects. So it's not the end of the world a lot of times. You can come up with some interesting things whether you actually intended to or not. But hence with working with watercolor, first of all, I'd say just go to the art supply store and don't get something fancy like this. Get one of these pre-made kits. Winsor & Newton makes them. Koi, K-O-I, makes them, that come with about, I wouldn't get more than a dozen or so prepackaged colors. And start with that. And get one of these things called a water brush. I think I had one in here. Get one of these things called a water brush, also at the art supply store, that has a brush. There we are. Has a brush on one end. And this is a reservoir that carries around its own water. And so when you're out sketching in the field, if you've got your little pre-made up palette and you've got one of these little water brushes, you can just go to town and have a great, great time and not have invested a tremendous amount of money. I worked that way for years. And that's how I typically suggest that people who want to get started do it. There are some amazing illustrators that sketch with us and urban sketchers all over the world that all they'll use is a water brush because it's just so easy to carry around. So that's something I would say. The other thing is that watercolor was such a mystery to me for a long, long, long time because I couldn't find the right teacher. And YouTube is a gift from the gods as far as I'm concerned. You can find just about any type of watercolor tutorial on there, whether you're talking about a quick sketching style like this or more of a fine arts approach. Somebody mentioned a minute ago, I've got some classes that are really great if you're just starting out for beginners on a platform called Skillshare. It is a subscription service, and if you write to me, I can give you a link that will, or I can give it, I'll give it to these guys and they can put it up. It'll get you 2 months free. And
Cool.
you can check it out. Yeah, you can check it out and see if it's the type of thing that that you want to be more involved with. But it certainly doesn't take you 2 months to get through my 2 classes. Most people do each of them in a day. And that's not a bad way to start either. It goes over some of these principles, but then gets in more detail as well. I forgot the most important thing at the end of this. I put some people on top of this bridge here, but the arch enemy of the urban sketcher, the humble pigeon. Laura was with me in Cuba when one of these left a big load on top of it. And thank God I was wearing a Panama hat. That saved me. All right. Very good. Any more questions?
We had one more question about color again, so maybe we could just, if you could tell us your full Tuscan color palette one more time.
I can do that.
Awesome. And do you always start with people? That was our other question.
Yes, I almost always do, unless there's no people, like if it's a Grand Canyon scene or something like that. Patty and I did the Utah National Parks recently, and I didn't start with people on those. But in an urban situation like this, yes, I do, because putting in that eye level line and getting a couple of people in there for measurement sets the scale for everything else. And it also relieves some of the pressure of that blank piece of paper. Looking at that white thing. I've been doing this for almost 50 years, and it still scares me. So when I draw a few people on there first, it kind of breaks the tension. It's like I've got some friends there. They're there to support me. Tuscan color palette. I probably use Naples yellow more than anything else. This is called alizarin crimson. It's kind of a purplish red. And this is Prussian blue, and it's those two together that I mix to get this kind of purplish shadow color. This is cobalt teal blue, T-E-A-L, and I think Winsor Newton makes, this is a Daniel Smith color. Winsor Newton makes one that's a lot like it. It's called turquoise, and it's the same thing. But for these Mediterranean skies, I'll use that mixed with a little bit of cobalt blue, and that works nicely. This is ultramarine, viridian, palm green. Yeah, I might use that some in this context. I'm not even going to tell you what that one is because I never use it, and it just confuse you anyway. This is called cadmium yellow deep. I've got some of this Mayan orange on top of it, but that's supposed to be this color in the corner here, the cad yellow. This is Mayan orange, and it's really intense if you want it to be, like this, or it can be really subtle, like that's just brushed on top of that Naples yellow. And you can see what I was talking about with the Naples yellow shining through, and it just kind of gives a glow to all of this. This is called, well, I didn't do these, did I? This is a deep sap green. It's more dark and more olive leaning than viridian, which is more of a blue-green. This is my cobalt blue. I love that. This is called neutral tint, and it's kind of a gray that you can mix with just about anything and immediately get a darker value of that same color. Burnt umber. This is burnt sienna, light. And I don't even know how to pronounce this one. This is a violet that I'll use for some clothes or mix in with the shadow color sometime, called carbazole. It's either carbazole or carbazole. Since we're in Italy, I'll say carbazole. I like that. And that's my custom Tuscany color palette.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Looks like we have one final question.
Good.
How do you determine the boundary of your sketch?
Well, you notice on this one, I started with the people and then moved out. And I'll get those people in, then start with the big shapes. And I could have carried this all the way out to the edges, and it would have been just fine. I could have taken the sky all the way up and whatnot, but I really wanted the focal point to be here. So they kind of grow organically, as I'll kind of start with what I want to be the focal point. And I don't want the rest of it, not only not detailed, but maybe not even drawn in, because that's where I want the focus. So I've just got enough to show context and push the eye right down in here. Does that make sense? That's a big yes.
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 Yes, definitely. I actually like how it organically works out around the edges. Gives a little life to it.
I like that too, and especially when you're wandering around drawing in a city or something that you're not familiar with, you can get several of these quick little studies on a sketchbook page by doing that, by just kind of starting in the middle and working your way out, and the sketches kind of grow into each other. And that's a fun thing too.
I have another question. What kind of paper are you using today?
That is an excellent question. Here we are. Fluid 100. This is made by that handmade company. It's 140 pound. This was just a little 9x12 drawing. And when I say 140 pound, that's about as light as you can go with watercolor paper. Some people will use 300 and it's almost like a piece of poster board or something. And that's fine, but it's not really necessary. 140 pound in a block like this, it stays relatively flat unless you soak it in water. And it carries the color very, very nicely. This is a pretty high quality paper, but it's smooth because I use so much ink in my drawings. If you go with arches or something like that, if you're going to be doing fine art type watercolor, your teacher will probably insist that you get arches paper from France. And you can get it in a 140-pound tube, but it's a real rough, coarse surface on top to hold that watercolor in because you're not using any ink on that. To work the way that I work, like I say, the Moleskine sketchbooks and these are my favorites. Thanks for asking.
Such good information. Okay, I think what we will do, this has been super fun. I hope everyone's had fun and enjoyed this as much as I did. We will try here to hold up our drawings and take a look and get a screenshot of everybody. So let's see if we can figure that out. Oh, there we go.
Oh, she already did. She unshared me.
Oh, sorry, I don't have the webcam. I cannot show my picture painting.
But you were going to post it later on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look at you. Fantastic. I'm seeing a screen now.
Laura Ruiz, did you get the screenshot?
There it is.
All right, who's getting it?
I got one.
Who was that just said that? Laura?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, perfect. There's a few people who haven't turned on their video. If you want to turn on your video so we can see your pictures, that would be great.
Do you want to try it one more time?
Yep.
All right, everyone, ready? Wait,
Awesome.
there we go. We got it.
Holy moly. I got to get a picture of this.
Oh,
Put them up one more time, everybody.
one more time.
Guys,
One more.
indulge me if you would. Oh, man. You guys are the best. Fantastic. Look, color. That's wonderful, Shelley. I love it.
Shelly, you're on mute.
Did you get this one?
Hey, Jim, all I had were markers, so I'm gonna try harder next time.
Well, I mean, markers are awesome. A lot of times when I'm doing workshops at universities and whatnot, I'll have people working in all three of those mediums. A lot in color pencil, a lot in marker, and a few in watercolor. But they all want to see the watercolor to see if it's something they're going to be interested in pursuing. So that's why I used it today. But man, whatever you love to work with, what I care about is that people draw, you know, that they explore that side of their creativity, and you can become so much more aware, you know, of your surroundings, of cities that you're visiting, natural areas, all those types of things. For me, it's a vehicle for discovery. You're not trying to replicate what you're seeing. You're really figuring things out as you go by collecting these images, and they're burned into your memory in a way that they would never be with your iPhone camera.
I was searching really hard for my blender marker
Yeah.
because I think that'll help, and I'll go back over it. I couldn't find it in the big pile of markers, so maybe that'll kind of tone down some of that. I don't know. I'll practice.
Good, good.
Thank you so much. This has been delightful.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you guys. Thanks, DFW ASLA. Thank you, Diane Collier. Thank you, Laura Moffitt, for being sponsors. I appreciate you all.
And thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's great to see everybody.
Please share your sketches online. We want to see everyone's sketches.
Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks. Shelly, happy early birthday.
That was not a gunshot you heard. That was Patty opening a bottle of Prosecco.
Oh,
You
Y'all
enjoy
have
the
done.
Aperol Spritz.
Let's go have a spritzer. Yay. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.